And we'll try that. Good morning, everybody. My name is Don Perlgut. I'm the CEO of Community Colleges Australia, which we refer to by our initials, CCA. We welcome to today's virtual event, which allows CCA and its New South Wales members the opportunity to share our sector's achievements with members of the New South Wales Parliament and other guests. We're pleased to welcome our two speakers today, the New South Wales Minister for Skills and Tertiary Education, the Honourable Dr. Geoff Lee, and the Chair of the Skills Board, Phillip Clark AO. Dr. Lee, the Minister, will be joining us in a short while as he's currently with the Premier of New South Wales in a press conference taking place at Parliament House. So we expect that he will be joining us in a short while. Before we commence, I want to call on Amelia Bolt, Aunty Mim, who's a proud Wiradjuri woman who is also connected to the Bundjalung country, for a welcome to country. Aunty Mim is speaking to us from ACE Colleges in Lismore. Over to you.
Thank you, Don. Thank you also to Natalie and Kerry for inviting me here today to do this acknowledgement of country. So I just have to correct that. That's an acknowledgement to country, not a welcome to country. And that's because I'm Wiradjuri and this is Bundjalung. And I'm doing an acknowledgement for everybody that's online today. Also, for the launch of this New South Wales ACE policy. So thank you for having me here today. It is with great pleasure and honour that I sit here with you, and for just to recognise all the ACE colleges that are represented around in all nations. And if we want to see great respectful change, it is very important that we work together to achieve this. And with that being said, thank you to ACE communities all around Australia for recognising and respecting the First Nation peoples of this great land that we all share together. I just want to do this acknowledgement in a different way today because we're online. It's a different kind of platform. And so I was just going to ask, it's kind of like a virtual experience, if you could all close your eyes or even turn your screens off and just listen to what I've got to say. Thank you. It'd be good if you could close your eyes. Just sort of just settle in. It's not scary. It's actually really good. So close your eyes. I want you to imagine that you're flying in an aeroplane. Your seatbelts are fastened and you are preparing yourself for landing. Hello, passengers. This is your captain speaking. We are currently sitting at approximately 3,000 feet altitude, approximately 3,500 feet above sea level, and are approaching quite a few nations in the lands of Australia. These lands belong to the First Nations people, who are the original custodians of this great, amazing continent. Your weather forecast, the temperature at the moment is currently 28 degrees Celsius and just a little overcast. As we descend upon these lands, I would like to acknowledge all the traditional owners that we will be gathering on today and pay respect to all our elders past, present and future, for they hold the memories, the traditions, the culture and the hopes of Aboriginal Australia. We must always remember that this always was and always will be traditional Aboriginal people's land. Please respect and follow all protocols that relate to their land, their people and their culture. On behalf of the cabin crew today, I would like to thank you for choosing to fly with Sisters Airlines Australia and hope you enjoy your stay in your beautiful part of the country. Thank you from your captain, Aunty Bolt, a proud Wiradjuri woman from the Wiradjuri Nation of Australia. Thank you. Don, you're muted. Can't hear you.
Thank you, Aunty Mim. From my Sydney location, I acknowledge that I am on the traditional lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Now, today we celebrate the milestone release of the New South Wales Government's Adult and Community Education, known as ACE, policy, and we launch CCA's latest report on government-funded VET. Our virtual room today is filled with almost 100 notable guests, including about 20 New South Wales Members of Parliament from the upper and lower house. Many people have sent in logos, icons, and avatars, which you can start to be able to see on screen. Now, I can't mention everybody individually. I do actually want to welcome a number. Jeanette Farrell, who's representing Matt Keane, the New South Wales Minister for Energy and Environment, and the member for Hornsby. Michael Johnson, member for Upper Hunter. Peter Sidgraves, member for Camden. Jenny Atchison, member for Maitland. David Shoebridge, MLC. Stephen Bali, member for Blacktown. Clayton Barr, member for Cessnock. Jihad Dib, member for Lakemba, Philip Donato, member for Orange, Trish Doyle, member for Blue Mountains, David Meehan, member for The Entrance, Dr. Marjorie O'Neill, member for Coogee, Geoff Provost, member for Tweed, Liesl Tesh, member for Gosford, and Jacqueline, who's representing Tamara Smith, member for Ballina. I also want to welcome my colleagues, Evelyn Goodwin and Claire Harris, who you won't see on screen, but the three of us are the team from CCA. And in addition, want to welcome from the New South Wales Department of Education, Executive Directors David Collins, Dr. Vinita Diodor, and all of their staff, with whom we work very closely, and especially with whom we've worked closely in the development of the ACE statement today. We also have today with us representatives of TAFE New South Wales, ASQA, the national regulator, the NCVER, whose data we have utilized, various adult and community education organizations out of Victoria, the Reading and Writing Hotline, and every New South Wales CCA member. Now, finally with us today is David Fuller. David is the chair of CCA. He is also the CEO of WA Illawarra, based in Wollongong. Following David, Phillip Clark will speak, and Theresa Collignon from Macquarie Community College will follow and introduce the minister. David, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. I'd like to firstly acknowledge that I'm on the traditional lands of the Wiradjuri people of the Five Islands Dreaming and of the Yuin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Can I welcome you all to this second parliamentary event of CCA, almost a year to the day since our last event in Parliament House. Minister Lee, as you've heard, will be joining us later this morning, but I'd like to thank Phillip Clark, who will speak later this morning, and all those members of Parliament who are here showing their support for CCA members this morning. It's really uplifting for us as practitioners, I suppose, to see so many people, particularly local members, supporting their local colleges, with almost 100 of us here today on this session. As Don has said, CCA is a national representative organisation for adult and community education providers called ACE providers, or community colleges. And today we're celebrating our sector's achievements, especially but not exclusively in the funding programs from the New South Wales Government. There would not be an electorate or a region in New South Wales where one or more of our 34 New South Wales CCA members deliver some form of educational, community or social service. And our members are particularly important and prevalent outside of metropolitan Sydney, with 2/3 of the members located and based in regional and remote rural communities. We feel, and I think you'll probably be convinced when you read our report, the quiet overachievers of our sector, providing post-secondary education across the state of New South Wales to diverse and widespread groups. ACE providers enable people to achieve their aspirations for a better life through skills and the employment opportunities their training creates. Some of our members, such as my own college in WEA Illawarra and ASQA College in Newcastle and the Hunter region, have unbroken history of adult and community education going back 107 years, both being founded in 1913. This makes us some of the oldest and most sustainable post-secondary institutions in Australia. Within VET, we ACE providers particularly specialise in reaching many of the state's most vulnerable and disadvantaged communities and groups. As well as delivering accredited VET, New South Wales TAFE ACE providers offer other learning opportunities, such as increasingly a number of independent special assistance secondary schools, catering for some of the most disadvantaged students. In my own case, WA Illawarra operates 4 separate secondary school campuses throughout the Illawarra, Shoalhaven and the Southern Highlands regions. As a community-based not-for-profit, New South Wales community colleges re-engage the missing learners, and we create and nurture social and community networks. And we do this all through our place-based local programs. New South Wales government investment in our sector reinforces and sustains our communities and our regions and our state at large. We are known for providing small classes. We focus on personal support and we work collaboratively together as a sector. We also create connections with other organisations and agencies and sectors. And the most important of all will be our connection to the New South Wales Government. State government funding, particularly through the ACE program and Smart and Skilled programs, are the lifeblood that supports our work. So on behalf of all New South Wales ACE providers, I want to thank the Minister and his colleagues in the state government for their support now and into the future. There is just so much more that we can do together. I want to thank those members in whose electorates our colleges and students reside for their ongoing support also for our work in their communities. CCA has researched the latest government-funded New South Wales data from the National Centre for Vocational Education and Research, known as NCVER. And we will email this report to you later and the infographic that goes along with it. The results are truly outstanding. And I'd like to encourage you to read it and to talk about it in your communities. I'd like now to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Phillip Clark. He is the chair of the New South Wales Skills Board. Throughout his professional life, Phillip has been committed to the betterment of Australians through his work with government, the corporate world, universities, and community organisations. He holds an honorary doctorate of laws from the University of Wollongong. I'm proudly wearing the tie myself. And we are so pleased that he will speak to us today about the importance and the impact of our sector. Over to you, Phillip.
Thanks, David. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Thanks for the opportunity to say a few words on behalf of the New South Wales Skills Board. The Skills Board oversights the New South Wales Smart and Skilled program. We also provide strategic advice to Minister Lee on the VET system in New South Wales. Smart and Skilled provides funding to VET providers to subsidise skills training. That includes ACE by subsidising the delivery of skills training through the New South Wales ACE program and through the Smart and Skilled program. Those programs are administered by the team at State Training Services under the very capable leadership of David Collins. I know I speak for my Skills Board colleagues and for David and his team when I say that ACE training provides a critical role in the New South Wales training system. ACE focus their efforts on providing skills training for the vulnerable and the disadvantaged, both in metropolitan areas and in regional and remote areas. And I particularly acknowledge the contribution that ACE members make to skills training for members of the Aboriginal community in New South Wales. They do a terrific job. The COVID pandemic's presented some unique challenges. It's created even more urgency, ensuring that vulnerable and disadvantaged members of society get the skills training they need to get jobs, build careers. Without skills training, these people tend to get to the back of the queue when it comes to getting jobs. It's been great to see how well the ACE sector's responded to the COVID crisis. The numbers we're seeing today speak for themselves. Finally, the ACE sector operates on a pretty modest budget and with limited resources and facilities. I've seen that for myself. The sector gets the most out of every dollar and provides good value for money. I make no secret of the fact that I'm an advocate for strong funding commitment to ACE to complement the work done by TAFE and private providers. I do acknowledge that the New South Wales Government, through the good offices of Minister Lee, recently provided some extra funding to help the ACE sector respond effectively to the COVID crisis. I reckon that was money well spent. Thanks. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you very much, Phillip. We really appreciate your support, your interest, and your ongoing commitment, not only to the ACE sector, but to the skills and VET sector of New South Wales, and including the not-for-profit community organisations for which you have been so active an advocate. Next, I want to hand over to Theresa Collignon, the CEO of Macquarie Community College, which covers a large part geographically of the northern, northwestern, and western suburbs of Sydney. Teresa is also a member of CCA's Board of Directors. And now over to you, Teresa.
Thanks, Don, and thanks very much, Phil and David. I particularly want to reinforce David Fuller's remarks about the value and the importance of New South Wales government funding, and it's terrific to hear your support for that too, Phil. CCA estimates that New South Wales government funding to the ACE sector is probably the best targeted in the whole of Australia in reaching the most vulnerable and disadvantaged learners. So I would like to highlight just some of the key facts, which I'm hoping you'll see in a moment on a snapshot on your screens, which will be, as Don and David said, emailed out to you. And we really punch above our weight in many, many areas. And I love that line about bringing people to the front of the queue, Phil, because when you look at these statistics, about 2/3 of the ACE students that we serve live in regional and rural New South Wales. About 1/5 of our students have a disability, and about 56% of our students are disadvantaged, which is an enormous number. More than 13% of our government-funded community education students are Indigenous. 28% are older students, mature age students, 50+, meaning that we cater for older learners better than any sector. And you'll see in this little piece down here that we are the dark blue line at the top of a lot of areas. And I'm particularly proud of the fact that with more than 62% of our students being women, it's clear that we do more to support the national goal of increasing female workforce participation than most other providers. We also achieve the same results around employment and further study as other vet providers, and we have very high satisfaction rates. And those achievements are especially notable because we as ACE providers proportionately engage more vulnerable and disadvantaged learners than other provider types. And that requires talented teams and a real commitment to engagement and inclusion. I want to share with you a video that Community Colleges has created. And if you just bear with me for a moment, Claire and I are going to swap screen sharing. Sorry, folks. We practice this. It's always hard to do. First up.
The highlight of my study was completing such a complex and very challenging course. I surprised myself and stepped up and was really proud that I finished the course and at the end of it was holding a business plan for a business.
It's changed my whole life. I'm now working full-time and everything else has fallen into place because of that. I am now the team leader at the NCVER Women and Children's Refuge, a domestic violence support worker, and also a homelessness support worker.
The diploma really helped my personal development skills to feel confident in leading others and make decisions in the workplace to maximise our outcomes on projects. Beyond that, it gave me the confidence to continue studying and enrol in a Bachelor of Business at the University of Newcastle.
So I think we're still waiting for the Minister's arrival. So I'm going to hand back to you, Don, as MC, to keep us on track here.
Thank you. In anticipation of the Minister's arrival, and we have a few minutes to chat. First, Philip, if you don't mind, I wanted to turn to you and ask you to reflect on some of the work that you've been doing as chair of the New South Wales Skills Board and the challenges that New South Wales faces with skills development. And what you see the role for the not-for-profit adult and community education providers are in supporting that. I know we might be taking you on the hop a little bit here with a question without notice, but I suspect that you can answer. Thank you.
Very, very happy to respond to that, Don. Obviously, in the last 6 months, we've been very focused on the impact of the COVID crisis, and we've commissioned some really good research in the Boston Consulting Group on many of the issues that have arisen. And in context of today's discussion, it was very interesting and not unexpected that Boston Consulting came up with a conclusion that the student cohort that ACE has focused on has been the student cohort that's done it the hardest, particularly vulnerable people and particularly disadvantaged, but also ESL people and students in the Aboriginal communities, and not just young students in the Aboriginal communities, but mature students as well. And I was pleased to see those matters highlighted. The response to that report is underway, and the Minister will no doubt have something to say about that. I think the second thing I'd like to highlight is the fact that at last the Australian states and Commonwealth Government are beginning to work more effectively together in the skills development area. The Joyce report was commissioned last year, and I see signs of the government acting on that, which are very encouraging. We have a National Skills Commissioner who's a former member of my Skills Board, Adam Boynton, who in fact we're meeting with straight after this meeting, with Minister Lee as well, so you better not hold him up. And I think the work that's starting to happen now, perhaps spurred on a little bit by the COVID crisis, is going to make a real difference to skills training in the next decade. And one of the most important differences, I think, people are beginning to recognise that education, post-school education, is not all about universities. Post-school education is about providing people with the skills that they need to get a job and pursue a career. And if we can deliver that to the cohort that you particularly work with, and I'm really impressed by your numbers again today, I reckon we'll be a lot better off.
Thank you, Philip. I should say we've had a message from the Minister's office, which is he should be joining us in about 4.5 to 5 minutes from now. During this time, David, I'd like to turn to you. You're based in the Illawarra, and you also do quite a bit of work in the Southern Highlands, around the Shoalhaven, and in the other experiences in the South Coast of New South Wales. It would be very valuable if you were able to share with us your reflections on the challenges that the ACE providers are facing now, outside of Metro Sydney. What the things you're experiencing, and also I'd say, in particular, some of the work you're doing with young people.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Don, I see the emergence of a mental health crisis in the regions, particularly areas impacted by the bushfires, and now a COVID crisis, and on top of that, businesses that used to employ young people through the tourism sector have collapsed quite often in these regional areas, and so there's a real sense of helplessness about, and so a lot of the work that we do has switched to trying to direct people to be well, and to find a referral pathway to get some help, because you can't learn unless you're well, unless you're whole. And so there's been a switch, if you like, in the last couple of months we've noticed, to try to deal with the wellness issues in those communities, and then we can get back to dealing with the skills issues in those communities. So, and I don't think that our community is probably any different, those on the south coast and into the Highlands regions, than probably anywhere on the north coast or even in the northwest of New South Wales. We've had a series of droughts, we've had a series of inclement weather events, and then a pandemic on top of it. I mean, it sounds all doom and gloom, but it does take a toll on people's wellness. And I think it would be remiss of us as a community sector not to acknowledge that and to switch our priorities to cater for that as best we can and work with other agencies. We work heavily with Headspace and a number of other of the local health networks to ensure that there are referral pathways for our young people and their parents quite often.
Thank you, David. And I think it's very important that you emphasize the mental health challenges that many people are facing, including young people, and how deep and profound that would be. Teresa, I wanted to turn to you because your Macquarie Community College covers a very large part geographically of Sydney, so a very diverse population, and it'd be very valuable for you to give some reflection on the groups, you know, and the disadvantaged other groups that you do, and how you find those.
Thanks, Don. Well, we've basically been at the COVID frontline since the end of January, managing mostly with our cohort being mature age migrant people, many of whom are from Chinese backgrounds. So that, of course, was very much an environment of fear for our clients. And we've been working with their inclusion especially. It has been quite challenging. We have our campuses closed pretty early in the piece, and we've had to keep them closed doors, but we've done the tritely said pivot, and like so many of the colleges have, on, you know, the smell of an oily rag, managed to turn to remote and home-based learning, and which has been a hugely wonderful professional stretch for our staff who frankly weren't in that game before. But what's really been interesting has been how important it has been to bring people who are on the wrong side of the digital divide along with us. And that has meant everything from getting them to come in for their first time to the campus to say, here is the on switch on the computer we may have to lend you. But a lot of our clients had the competing demands of sharing one home computer with their partner and their children, but many of them being women meant they were kind of last in the queue for that. And so it's been really a lot of outreach, a lot of support, whether that's by phone, by laptop, but we actually have, I think, really surprised ourselves on the upside, as I know many of the colleagues in the sector have, about how willing people are going to give it a crack and have a go, and I'll try it. And it's overcoming those fears of how is this going to work, and with the best will in the world committing to delivering quality, keeping people engaged. And in fact, our retention rates in some of our vocational education courses like childcare, aged care, business have been really sensational, and we have a lot of people who are waiting for placements, of course, but we're keeping them fresh, we're keeping them engaged while they wait to get into an aged care facility for their placement. But I have to say it's been challenging. And the COVID relief grant, the ACE for ACE colleges, was really helpful in terms of investing that into that professional development, and even some of the equipment, that's just made a tremendous difference. And the recent opportunity to speak with people in the smart and skilled area about the need to keep funding, the modifications to the ACE contract, they've all been incredibly helpful, and credit where credit is due to the team at the department for reaching out, asking us how can they help, how really listening and doing whatever we can all do together to make things work for the clients. And when you're dealing with our sort of clients that have disadvantage, that flexibility and agility has been terrific. So that inclusion, bridging the social and the digital divide, and particularly with our particular clients from migrant backgrounds, it's been quite frightening for them. They're fearful for their families that live overseas, the mental health aspect of that. But I think the metro colleges, the regional colleges, the rural colleges have done amazing work throughout this period.
Thank you, Teresa. I've just had the message that the minister's still a couple of minutes away. Two different things. The first thing is the chat is open if people want to put in testimonials or questions. We've had some, I think David Collins, also our friends in Robinson College in Broken Hill, who, by the way, are thrilled because of the reopening with South Australia, and our colleague Evelyn Goodwin. But before we get to any of those, really first to you, Teresa, and then to you, David, any word about foundation skills? And the importance of foundation skills and the value that ACE colleges play in delivering that to the residents and learners of New South Wales.
Oh, you've picked my favourite topic, Don. Yeah, look, we are really thinking hard about that transition, the new transition for people who are newly unemployed, who may or may not have work skills but may not have applied for a role, may still have some disadvantages in the application piece, and thinking about their vocational direction. So we're doing some work on the foundation skills of employability, but definitely for our audience, again, we are doing a lot on digital literacy, really fundamental digital literacy, and also then those English speaking literacy and numeracy courses. We really have pretty much ceaseless demand for the foundational skills that is funded by ACE and also the Foundation Skills Cap, and we certainly couldn't do without it, nor could our clients. And we have a beautiful group of refugees that came from Syria working in community in West Ryde, and we're doing a combined English and digital skills program, and it is just so exciting to see them engaged, learning all about how to access services, and really that sense of inclusion has been really powerful for them.
Yes,
David, in the Illawarra, your experience in foundation skills and that delivery.
Yeah, absolutely vital. We find that many people fall through the cracks of mainstream provision. Many people hit the wall when they lose their job, and they need to come back, and they have to get themselves, as Teresa said, on the right side of the digital divide. It's a shock for them, and the foundation skills provide for us an opportunity to engage with a lot of the older workers and people who want to get back into the workforce, even if it's just on a part-time basis. So there's a fair market for us in that older age group, but also in the school leaver group. We find there's an enormous opportunity for us to, sadly, have to top and tail the what's left after they come through a secondary school. They sometimes don't come out with the skills that are relevant to get or to keep a job. And I think that's the really important thing. They might be able to get a job, but will they be able to keep a job? And so we're really focusing our foundation skills in such a way that we try and build in, if you like, a real purpose, what they do with us when they're with us. So it's a very theme-based activity now we're doing with them, often project-based, where they actually make something or particular thing through a social enterprise and get out and sell things and raise money for charity, but give them a sense of purpose and achievement and showing them what is required to be part of a team.
Thank you. I did want to also point out something that Teresa and David had just mentioned earlier, and that, of course, is that the training outcomes that our members obtain in New South Wales are especially notable because the fact of our community education providers proportionately engage more vulnerable and disadvantaged learners. And one thing which we mentioned very briefly, which is really how well we do with engaging female learners. The NCVER data, we have this in our report, shows that almost 50% of the female ACE learners were not employed before training, but employed afterwards. I mean, this is a tremendous leg up into the job environment, and almost 3/4 of them were employed after training. Again, well exceeding the New South Wales average. Now, these were pre-COVID, but nevertheless, it just shows our ability to do that. Now, we will be seeing, I think, Dr. Lee joining us in a minute or so, so while they get that settled. Also wanted to note that some of the figures also show some 83% of female learners were employed or in further study, and some 85% achieved their main reason for doing their training, which was one of those great, fabulous things. So women have really been particularly disadvantaged during this time, and it's very important that our sector has done very well in that. Now, we're really pleased to see the Minister, Dr. Geoff Lee, who is fresh from having done, I think, both a division as well as a press release, or a press conference with the New South Wales Premier. So it's all action central at Parliament House. Minister, it is a great pleasure to have you with us today. We started today with just under 100 attendees, including some 20 members of Parliament. You might be able to see on your screen Phillip Clark, AO, from the Skills Board, who you know well, and the CEOs, Theresa Collignon and David Fuller. So, Minister, over to you, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much, Don, and can I apologise to everybody, and thank you, Don, for your patience. As you said, that we did a press conference just then with the Premier, and we're changing the way that both parents can actually go and watch their kids play sport this weekend. And coming into the season of grand finals, there'll be hundreds of thousands of parents relieved that they don't have to make the choice between their mum or dad or their grandparent and things. So it's quite good news in terms of that. But can I thank all the community colleges online today for your work in the sector. As I've said before quite publicly, and you'll know this, Don, that I think community colleges play a vital part of the educational sector, and that they do things that many other RTOs, well, some RTOs, but many other private providers don't do. And the community colleges actually tap into areas where other people don't tap into. And I think especially around the margins, around the people that feel some barriers in terms of formalised education, in terms of breaking down those barriers to giving people the opportunity to engage with training is so important. As we've seen, you know, from the feds and the state, that skills will be a major part of the reform for our nation, in particular for our state. Skills is one of our 6 points of recovery in terms of equipping people to upskill, to reskill, or just to get a job. So we're looking at a very difficult situation next year. Yes, we've done quite well in terms of numbers for New South Wales, I should say, people returning to work. But we're looking at between 50 and 100,000 people having to actually change their jobs. So they've got one skill set, they're in one industry. That industry is rapidly, maybe travel, maybe tourism, maybe those sorts of industry. Even hospitality, we may have some issues in that. But what do we do with the people to get them back into work? So I think skills overall will become an increasingly important focus for the coming 18 months and perhaps a little bit longer, which is great news. And that's why I think it's so important for the release of your report, Don, into the adult and community education, because as we know, one of the enablers of social mobility, enabling people to not only get into the economic cycle, but to actually change their perspective of life, is to actually use education as an enabler to actually enter the workforce and then provide for their families. Yes, of course, our migrant communities, our CAL communities have certainly slowed down as our international borders are closed, but we still have some significant issues to deal with as everybody knows. Those that haven't engaged in formal education post-secondary school, I think there's great opportunity, especially some of those kids that are actually leaving school this year. What are they going to do, and where are those casual jobs that have now disappeared in the economy? I think we have great challenges to, as I said, upskill, pre-vocational work, and engage in a positive way for our young people. probably the best news is we made the announcement last week that we've committed $160 million in partnership with the federal government. They're $160 million for job trainer program. Training Services New South Wales are currently just working out the plan to roll out that money, how we're going to roll out that money. I expect to have further details, but I can assure you that the community colleges will be part of that as long as they're part of the AQF quality framework. That's what we need, whether it's short courses, whether it's pre-vocational courses. So we'll have a whole range of different things, whether up to full qualifications. We're just trying to work out. That will happen very soon. So there'll be a 12 to 18 month period where we're contracted to deliver a certain amount of training. So we look at great opportunities for the expansion of the industry anyway in the short term, in the next 18 months. I think that's very positive news, but really it's about thanking community colleges for your work you do. It is a tough market, and it is not an easy market to work in because of the funding. I acknowledge that. It is tough for everybody in government at the moment. When you look at our spending, it's not an easy thing to get extra money in these days, but we're going to do our best. But Don, you're a shining light in the thing, and Don actually never stops ringing me, emailing me. So Don, can you not just email me every day? Every second day would probably be better. You know, probably get better results. Just saying that. Can I thank everybody else? Phillip Clark, can I thank you for your work on the Skills Board, because you're doing a fantastic job of corralling the cats, herding the cats, as they say. So well done. It's like shoveling cats in a wheelbarrow, I guess that's the expression. But Phillip, you've done a remarkable job, so thank you. And to everybody else, thank you for taking the time. And I do apologise that I was late, but the Premier is my boss, and sometimes she comes first. And today was one of those days, so I apologise and thank you for your time, and well done on the launch of your report. Great insights and great commitment to the future of New South Wales.
Thank you, Minister. I will turn to David Fuller in a second or two just to do a final thanks and to close the proceedings. But before I do, Minister, I want to thank you really on behalf of for the whole government, the New South Wales government, for the approach that has really had great integrity, enormous commitment, and the unwavering support that you and the New South Wales government has had for the New South Wales ACE sector. That release of the ACE policy statement, it is an historic milestone, and it is one that we are celebrating today, and we will continue to celebrate for some time in the future. We will be bringing it to attention to your colleagues in the Commonwealth government. It really is. It's important not just for this state, but nationally, for what it means for the future of skills. So thank you for that. It has been outstanding. For the final word, David, over to you for the final thanks to Minister Lee and to Phillip Clark and to Teresa and everyone else for attending.
Thank you, Don. Well, thank you, Minister, and thank you, Phillip, for your kind words about the community sector. We are all passionate believers in this. I'd really like to encourage all of the local members and thank them for dialing in today too and listening. Please go to your local media outlets and release the information that we're going to send you on what community colleges do for your electorate. It's important that the community realise and understand that what's available to them. I think it's really, really important. Thank you very much for David Collins and the team. Department of Education, it's really, really good to know that these guys have got our backs. They understand what we do. We've got a really good team there and we work closely. So thank you again, Minister, for all of your support. We hope to see you again in a year's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Or sooner, David, perhaps in a year.
Possibly. Thank you.
And with that, we are now concluding. And a reminder to everybody of the vision of Community Colleges Australia, which is for Australia to achieve more dynamic and vibrant communities, informed and empowered through learning. Thank you very much for your attendance, and we look forward to maintaining contact with everybody who has participated today.
Thanks, Don.